What if the quiet man sitting in the corner of a greasy burger joint wasn't there for lunch, but for justice? It started on a Tuesday, the kind of day that made the world feel half asleep. The sun was dull behind a film of smog, the air heavy with the faint odor of oil and asphalt. Inside Burger Barn, the flicker of a dying neon sign cast a sickly red pulse across the cracked linoleum floor. The lunch rush had just ended. Grease hissed lazily on the griddle. Fries browned in the fryer with mechanical rhythm, and at a corner booth, facing the counter, his back to the wall, sat a man in a plain gray jacket. No one noticed him. That was the point. He looked like any other customer, mid-30s, unshaven, a disposable cup of soda sweating beside a paper tray. But his eyes, and calm, precise, and constantly scanning, told another story. He'd been here 3 times this week. Each time he ordered the same thing. A cheeseburger, no pickles, extra onions. Each time something strange happened. The order would arrive wrong. Not by accident. Deliberately. He could see the smirk on the cashier's face, the quiet snickering between employees as they handed him his meal. A missing patty here, a slice of raw onion in place of grilled, soda watered down to nothing. To anyone else it was bad service. But he knew better. Because months ago this very restaurant had been flagged in a corruption investigation. Part of a network suspected of laundering money through fake transactions and employee kickbacks. And today his patience had finally run out. The name on his badge, one which no one would see until much later, read Agent Lucas Grant, Internal Operations. But here, to them, he was just another tired man grabbing lunch. He took a slow sip of soda, eyes on the counter. Behind it, a teenage cashier was laughing with the shift manager. A burly man with a buzz cut and a voice like gravel. "Make sure he gets the special sauce this time," the manager whispered, and they both snickered. Grant didn't react. He unwrapped his burger, calm and deliberate as the smell of burnt meat filled the air. He took a bite, chewed once, and stopped. Inside was a mess of cold, half-cooked beef and something else. A smear of something grainy, bitter. He set the burger down. His jaw tightened. Across the room, the cashier watched him, waiting for a reaction. Waiting for the joke to land. But instead, Grant did something that made the laughter die mid-breath. He smiled. Not wide, not angry, just a quiet, unsettling curve of the mouth. Then slowly he stood up. The sound of his chair scraping the floor made the fryer hiss louder somehow, as if the room itself tensed. He walked to the counter, casual, polite. "Excuse me," he said, his tone even. "Mind if I speak with the manager?" The cashier blinked, nervous now. Sure." "Hey, Rick," the manager approached, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Problem with your order, pal?" Grant nodded slightly. You could say that. He reached into his jacket pocket and slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a folded receipt. But the manager's eyes darted to the glint of something else just for a second. Not a gun, not yet. Just a flash of cold metal, a badge turned slightly away but unmistakable. The laughter stopped. The kitchen went quiet. Even the fryer seemed to pause mid-sizzle. "Funny thing," Grant said softly, sliding the receipt across the counter. "This shows I was charged for 6 combo meals in the last 3 days. Same card, same time. Except I only ordered 1. Each time," Rick swallowed. "Must be a mistake." Grant tilted his head. "That's what I thought. But when the same mistake happens across multiple stores in your chain, it starts to look less like bad luck and more like organized theft." The room felt smaller now. The hum of the refrigerator in the back grew louder. One of the cooks froze mid-motion, holding a spatula. Grant leaned in. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You've been rerouting transaction data. Small skims under customer orders, rounding errors. Except they all end up in the same offshore account. Sound familiar?" Rick's face flushed, his hands trembling. "Look, I don't know what you're talking about," Grant interrupted by calmly lifting the burger wrapper. "And the food tampering? That part of the plan too? Or just your idea of customer service?" Rick opened his mouth, but before a word could leave, Grant placed something else on the counter. A small black device blinking red. A recorder. Every word. Every laugh. Every whispered insult. All of it captured. The cashier gasped softly. You're a cop?" Grant smiled again, quieter this time. Something like that. He turned slightly, surveying the room. Every employee stood frozen, The cook by the fryer, the kid mopping the floor, the girl at the drink station holding a cup mid-air. The customers, a handful of office workers, and a delivery driver had fallen silent too. Rick backed away slowly. "Listen, man, we can talk about this." Grant's tone hardened. "You had plenty of chances to talk. Now you can explain it to them." He pointed toward the door. Two men in plain clothes stepped in, moving fast and silent. Their presence was sharp, professional. The kind that changes the air in a room. One of them flashed an ID. Federal Investigations Bureau. Rick froze. The color drained from his face. "Rick Calloway," one agent said flatly. "You're under arrest for fraud, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice." The words hit like gunfire. The staff backed away. Someone whispered a prayer. As Rick was cuffed, he turned toward Grant, face twisted in panic. "You set me up. You came here just to order lunch," Grant interrupted calmly, "and make sure the right people paid for it." But as the agents led Rick toward the door, something in the kitchen moved. A shadow, quick, subtle, disappearing through the back exit. Grant noticed. His hand went instinctively to his earpiece. "Unit 3, we've got a runner. North exit." A burst of static. "Then copy that." Moving to intercept, but no one emerged. The back door swung slowly, creaking. Outside, the parking lot shimmered in the heat. Empty. Grant followed, pushing through the door, scanning the alley. A trash bin. A flickering security light. No sound but the buzz of flies, then a faint beep. He looked down. A small black device lay half hidden in the dirt. Identical to his recorder, but newer. He picked it up. The light blinked twice, then died. Grant frowned. "What the hell?" He turned it over and froze. On the underside, scratched into the casing, were 3 letters, IAO. He knew that acronym. Everyone in his line of work did. Internal Affairs Operations. The unit above his own. The one that investigated agents. A cold ripple crawled down his spine. Back inside, the chaos was unraveling. Employees shouting, phones ringing, one of the agents radioing for backup. But Grant barely heard any of it. His eyes were locked on that device, the faint smear of grease on its surface. The same kind used on the burger he'd been served. Someone else had been here. Someone who knew exactly who he was. He looked back at the restaurant. Through the window, a single customer still sat at a table, a woman in a navy coat sipping soda through a straw. Her gaze met his for just a second, calm, unflinching. Then she smiled, set down the cup, and walked out through the side door without a word. Grant called after her, "Ma'am, excuse me," but by the time he reached the door, she was gone. Only the cup remained on the table, condensation dripping down its side. He picked it up carefully. There was a note folded beneath it, written in neat blue ink. "You're not the only one ordering revenge today." Grant's pulse quickened. The letterhead at the top of the note bore the same 3 letters, IAO. Somewhere outside, sirens wailed in the distance. The restaurant's neon light flickered violently, bathing the room in flashes of red and white. Grant stood still for a long moment, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. The woman's words echoed in his head like static. "You're not the only one ordering revenge." He looked toward the kitchen, the half-eaten burger still sitting on the tray, and for the first time since he'd walked in, Agent Lucas Grant realized this wasn't just about a corrupt restaurant. It was about him. Somebody wanted him to see this. To take the bait, the question was why. Outside, a black sedan pulled out from the curb, headlights off. In the reflection of its tinted window, the woman's face appeared again, calm, composed, and watching. Then the car vanished into the dark. Grant exhaled slowly, pocketed the note, and looked back one last time at the flickering red sign. Tomorrow, he thought, he'd find out who really placed the order. But tonight, the only thing certain was this: lunch was over. The hunt had just begun. Rain came without warning that night. Thin, silvery sheets cascading down the empty streets, turning neon signs into rivers of light. The world outside the burger barn blurred, as if someone had smeared reality with a wet brush. Inside his car, Lucas Grant sat motionless, the note in his hand illuminated by the faint blue glow of the dashboard. The letters IAO seemed to pulse with each flash of lightning. He'd seen those letters before, buried deep in redacted reports, whispered in corridors where doors always closed too quickly. Internal Affairs Operations. The watchdog of the watchdogs, the ghost who investigated men like him, but this felt different, personal. Grant unfolded the note again. You're not the only one ordering revenge today. The handwriting was precise, steady, someone calm under pressure. He thought of the woman in the navy coat. Her composure. The way she met his eyes, unflinching, like she'd been waiting for that exact moment. Whoever she was, she knew him. And she wanted him to know she knew. He started the engine. The wipers beat against the glass as he pulled away from the curb. Through the rain, the city seemed to breathe. Steam curling from manholes, the low hum of power lines, the faint glow of distant sirens bouncing off concrete. He turned down a narrow street toward the field office on 5th, where the night shift analysts worked under flickering fluorescent lights and old coffee. By the time he arrived, the rain had thickened into a curtain. He moved quickly through security. No small talk, no eye contact. Inside, the office was half lit, filled with the low buzz of machinery. Rows of screens displayed data streams, transaction logs, archive security feeds. He walked straight to his desk, tossed the wet note onto the surface, and logged into the secure system. His reflection hovered ghost-like on the monitor as the screen came alive. He typed in a trace command, IAO files, internal access logs, last known agent activity, access denied. He tried again, bypassing through a secondary authentication key, one not listed under his name. Access restricted, classified level 5. That wasn't just above his clearance. It was off limits to everyone except a handful of division directors, which meant whoever had left that note wasn't just in the system. They were above it. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. Rain drummed faintly against the windows. Somewhere behind him, an old vending machine rattled. Then a voice. You look like you've seen a ghost. Grant turned. Standing by the doorway was Agent Sarah Duvall, his partner of 2 years. Short dark hair, trench coat draped over one arm, eyes sharp and unreadable. She stepped closer, her boots leaving wet prints on the floor. Burger Barn sting went sideways? She asked, setting her coat down. He exhaled. You could say that. She frowned, glancing at the soaked note.
I.O., what's that supposed to mean?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. She picked it up, squinting. Who gave this to you? Grant hesitated. A woman, civilian, at least she looked like one. Description? Navy coat, mid-30s, calm, too calm. Duvall raised a brow. You think she's IAO? Grant shook his head slowly. If she is, she's not supposed to be here. They don't operate in field investigations. They observe from distance, pull files, issue audits, not this. He pulled up the surveillance feed from the restaurant, fast-forwarding through the arrest. Grainy footage flickered. Rick Calloway being cuffed, the kitchen in chaos. Then the back door. The runner. The woman. There, Grant said, freezing the frame. The camera caught her just as she glanced toward the lens, eyes piercing, features caught in the flicker of red neon. But the timestamp glitched, flickering erratically. A thin line of digital static rippled across her face, distorting it. Duvall leaned closer. Corrupted file? Not possible. This system's live back to the bureau server. She stared at him. Unless someone tampered with it before the upload. Grant zoomed in. The pixelation sharpened for a fraction of a second, enough to make out a small silver emblem pinned to her lapel. Not IAO, something else. Circular with 3 concentric rings. He felt a chill crawl through him. I've seen that before. Where? He hesitated. A case that got sealed. 2 years ago. Operation Indigo. Duvall's expression darkened. That's impossible. Indigo's been scrubbed. I know, Operation Indigo. The name itself had become myth inside the Bureau. A classified mission gone wrong. Files erased, agents reassigned, one found dead. Grant had only been a junior analyst back then, but he remembered the rumors. Corruption buried inside the agency, covered up under layers of fake audits. Duvall crossed her arms. You think this woman's tied to Indigo? I think she's tied to something bigger. He looked back at the frozen frame, the woman's half-glitched face, her faint smile, that same calm that had followed him out of the restaurant. Duvall straightened. All right, let's trace her. You said navy coat. That emblem. Start with surveillance grids around the block. Maybe she... Before she could finish, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died completely. Darkness swallowed the room. The monitors went black. The low hum of the server rack sputtered into silence. For a few seconds, the only sound was the rain. Then faintly, the high-pitched whine of an external generator struggling to start. Backup power should have kicked in, Duval muttered, drawing her weapon. Grant's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered, a voice, calm female. The same tone he'd heard in his mind since the restaurant. Agent Grant, step away from your terminal. He froze. Who is this? Not over the phone. You're being traced. What do you want? Answers, she said simply. The kind your own agency buried. Then the line went dead. The light snapped back on, flooding the room in sterile white. The monitors rebooted, but the feed Grant had been reviewing was gone. Replaced with a message, file deleted, unauthorized access detected. Duval cursed under her breath. They wiped it remotely. Grant's voice was barely a whisper. They knew we were watching. The next morning he met Duval in a parking garage beneath the old district courthouse. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and metallic. She leaned against her car, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Whoever this woman is, Duval said, she's ahead of us. She's in the system and she's watching everything. Grant nodded. Then we stopped chasing shadows. We draw her out. How? He looked at the note again, still folded in his pocket. She mentioned revenge. That means motive. You don't seek revenge unless something was taken from you. Duval frowned. Personal connection? Or professional betrayal? He took a breath. I'll start where Indigo ended. The Bureau archives were buried 6 floors beneath the main headquarters, guarded by 2 levels of biometric locks and a silence that felt alive. Grant walked the narrow aisles lined with metal shelves and sealed evidence boxes, the air thick with dust and secrets. He found the file under a false label, Logistics Report 19C. Inside were fragments, old photographs, encrypted drives, and 1 burned ID card. The name was half melted, but he could still make out the initials. E.C. Duval's voice echoed in the corridor. Grant, you need to see this. She stood by a terminal at the far end, a small screen displaying archived personnel records. She typed the initials, Evelyn Carter, former field analyst, Division Internal Affairs Operations, status deceased, cause, field incident during Operation Indigo. Grant stared at the photo. The same woman, same eyes, but the report said she'd been dead for 2 years. He felt the weight of the room shift. Then who did I see? Duval's voice was low. Either a ghost or someone who wants us to think she is. Grant's mind raced. If Evelyn Carter was alive, she'd gone to impossible lengths to disappear. Erasing files, planting devices, infiltrating a sting operation. But why reveal herself now? He studied her photograph again. There was something about her expression. Determined. Cold. Like someone who had seen too much and refused to look away. A faint hum drew his attention. The small drive inside the file had powered on, glowing faint blue. A single folder blinked. Indigo Final Reel MP4. He opened it. Static. Then a grainy video feed. Handheld. Chaotic. Agents shouting. A warehouse. A deal gone wrong. Gunfire. And through the smoke, a glimpse of something impossible. Bureau agents firing on their own. The camera fell. The last thing it captured was Evelyn's face, blood-streaked, whispering into the lens. They lied to you all. The corruption didn't stop with them, it started above. Then black. The screen flickered. New text appeared across it like someone typing remotely. You weren't supposed to find this, Grant. Duval's eyes widened. Someone's in the system right now. Another line appeared. If you want the truth, come alone. Pier 17. Midnight. Grant looked at Duval. She's calling me out. You're not going alone. He hesitated. If this is a trap, I can't risk you too. She smirked faintly. Then it's a good thing I don't take orders. That night the docks were empty except for the whisper of wind and the rhythmic slap of waves against rusted hulls. Fog rolled in from the bay, thick and heavy. Grant moved through the mist, every sense alert. In the distance, a figure stood beneath a flickering floodlight. The woman in the navy coat. Evelyn Carter. She turned as he approached, her expression unreadable. You found me, she said. Did you ever want to be found? A faint smile. Only by the right person. He stepped closer. You're supposed to be dead. I was, she said quietly. until I realized death was the only way to keep them from silencing me. Them? The Bureau. The directors. The ones who turned Indigo into a cover operation. They blamed my team for their crimes, erased the evidence. The next morning arrived bruised and gray. The city smothered beneath low clouds that turned every window pane into a dull mirror. Lucas Grant hadn't slept. His car sat parked on a side street near the docks, the windshield fogged with condensation, the world outside suspended between rain and silence. The drive Evelyn had dropped during the chaos glinted faintly in his hand, small, ordinary, yet heavy enough to make his pulse quicken every time he looked at it. He hadn't told anyone he'd kept it. Not Duval, not the Bureau Tech Division that would have logged, dissected, and buried it in red tape before it ever saw daylight. Instead, he'd driven until the roads blurred, until the fog wrapped him in anonymity. Now, in the weak dawn light, he slid the drive into his laptop. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered, stuttered, and filled with cascading lines of code. A single window opened. Project Indigo archive access granted. The first file was video, grainy, time-stamped 3 years earlier. A boardroom. Government seal on the wall. Men and women in suits, faces half-shrouded by shadow. The audio was distorted, but a few words cut through. Asset reallocation. Operational containment. Civilian casualties are an acceptable variance. Grant leaned forward, jaw tightening. He recognized one of the voices, the Deputy Director of Internal Operations, his own superior. Another belonged to a man he'd only seen in passing. Thomas Reddick, one of the Bureau's architects of oversight. Both now sitting comfortably in power, both responsible for hundreds of investigations, including his own. The next clip showed something worse. Surveillance from a warehouse, armed agents surrounding crates marked as food supply distribution. But when one broke open, it revealed not food, documents, cash, unregistered weapons. A sting-turned smuggling ring, and there in the corner of the footage was Evelyn Carter. Younger, alive, shouting something over the chaos. The camera shook, a flash. Then the screen went black. Grant exhaled shakily. He knew now why she'd faked her death. Why she'd called it revenge. A sharp knock on the window made him start. He turned. Duval stood outside, rain dripping from her hair, eyes burning with something between anger and relief. "You vanished," she said when he opened the door. "You think I wouldn't track your car?" Grant pocketed the drive, stepped out into the cold. "You shouldn't be here. You're investigating on your own. After what happened at the docks, command's ready to pull your clearance. You're one signature away from suspension." "Then you shouldn't be talking to me," he said, half a smile curling on his lips. Duval's expression softened just slightly. "Since when has that ever stopped me?" They stood under the skeletal remains of a streetlight, wind stirring the fog around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "Did you find her?" "No, she found me. And she left this." He held up the drive. Duval frowned. "You didn't report it?" "Would you?" She hesitated. No. They went to an old diner off the highway. One of those places where the air smelled of burnt coffee and old secrets. Inside, a jukebox hummed low in the corner, playing a song that had long outlived its time. They sat in the farthest booth, laptop between them, rain streaking down the windows. Grant replayed the footage. As the boardroom voices echoed softly from the speakers, Duval's face hardened. "That's Reddick," she said. "And Jesus, that's Keller. He's still heading counter-operations." Grant nodded. They turned Indigo into a front, used it to reroute seized assets, manipulate audits, wipe internal trails. Evelyn's team must have uncovered it. They made her the fall guy. Duval leaned back, eyes distant. So she didn't vanish because she wanted to. She vanished because she had to. Grant stared at the frozen image of Evelyn's face on the screen. And now she's back for revenge. Not on them, on the system that let them live above it. The waitress passed by, setting down 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "Rough night?" she asked absently. Grant managed a thin smile. "You could say that." When she left, Duval said, "If you go public with this, they'll bury you. They'll say it's fabricated. They'll label you rogue, unstable, compromised, same way they did with her. I'm not looking to go public, then what?" He met her eyes. "I'm going to make them confess." That night he went home for the first time in 3 days. His apartment was small, sterile, the kind of place that felt temporary even after years of living there. He poured a drink, sat in the dark, and listened to the hum of the refrigerator as if it were breathing with him. The drive lay on the table beside his badge, two objects that now felt like enemies. He thought of Evelyn's words at the dock, the truth or the job. He'd built his life on believing those two things could coexist. Now they stood on opposite ends of the same line. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. No text, just coordinates. Same pattern as the night before. This time, the location pointed to an underground parking lot below an abandoned government annex. He stared at the screen for a long time, then grabbed his coat. The city was silent when he arrived, the kind of silence that presses against your chest. The entrance ramp dipped into darkness. As he descended, motion sensors flicked on overhead lights one by one, creating a tunnel of cold fluorescence. A voice echoed from the far end. "You brought someone." Evelyn stepped out from behind a pillar, dressed in black this time, her hair pulled back. Her eyes flicked toward the far corner where Duval stood, gun half raised. "She insisted," Grant said. Evelyn didn't smile. "You shouldn't have come." "Then why send the coordinates?" "Because I wanted you to see what happens when truth becomes collateral." She gestured toward a sedan parked behind her. The trunk was open. Inside, files, photos, stacks of printed emails. Proof. Duval lowered her weapon slightly. "You stole Bureau property." "I reclaimed evidence the Bureau stole from us," Evelyn said. "These documents trace funding lines straight from the directors to offshore accounts. It's not just corruption, it's control." "Control of what?" Grant asked. "Policy, media, investigations. They don't just hide crimes, they decide which ones exist." Grant stepped closer. "Then why come to me?" "Because you're already inside their story. The restaurant, the sting, they used you to stage a false operation, to make it look like they were cleaning house while the real rot sat untouched. You're the perfect scapegoat." The words hit harder than he expected. "They set me up. They set everyone up," Evelyn said quietly. "You, me, every agent who thought we were serving justice." The sound of tires screeching cut through the air. Duval turned. 2 black SUVs had entered the ramp, lights off. Men in tactical gear spilled out, moving fast. Evelyn grabbed one of the files from the trunk and shoved it at Grant. "Take this and run." He shook his head. "Not without you. Lucas, go." Gunfire erupted, echoing like thunder inside the concrete chamber. The flash of muzzle fire lit the space in violent bursts. Duval returned fire, shouting for cover. Evelyn moved toward the side exit, motioning for Grant to follow. They ran through a maintenance corridor that smelled of rust and gasoline. Behind them, the heavy footsteps of the strike team grew louder. Grant ducked behind a pillar, breathing hard. "They knew we'd come here." "They always know," Evelyn said, reloading. "That's why we ended tonight." She tossed him a small device, a detonator. "Garage level's wired. This building's one of their ghost archives. You destroy it, you destroy everything they've hidden." Grant stared at the button in his hand. "There's still evidence inside." "There's always more evidence," she said. "But sometimes the only way to expose the truth is to burn what they control." He hesitated, heart pounding. The sound of boots grew nearer. Evelyn's gaze softened. "You wanted justice, Lucas. This is what it costs." She turned to cover the hall, firing into the advancing shadows. Grant ran, the detonator slick in his grip. Smoke filled the air, thick with gunpowder and the metallic sting of fear. He reached the exit door, burst through into the cold night, and stopped. The city lights stretched before him, distant and indifferent. He could still hear the gunfire below. He could still turn back. Then, a single shot echoed. Different. Final. Silence followed. Grant's breath caught. He turned, looking back toward the stairwell. But before he could move, an explosion tore through the structure. The ground trembled. Fire ripped upward, swallowing the night in orange and black. The shock wave threw him backward, glass raining around him like shards of memory. When he opened his eyes, smoke coiled from the ruins. Duval staggered out through the haze, face cut, coughing. "Where's Carter?" Grant didn't answer. He just stared at the burning wreckage. The files, the truth, the ghosts, all gone. Later, as fire trucks screamed in the distance, Grant sat on the curb, trembling hands wrapped around the detonator. The metal was scorched, half melted, yet the button remained intact, never pressed. He looked at it, then at Duval. "I didn't detonate it." Her eyes widened. "Then who?" The words died in her throat. From the smoke, a shadow moved, limping, slow, unmistakable. Evelyn, her coat torn, face streaked with soot, but alive. She walked past them without a word, disappearing into the chaos of flashing lights and shouting voices. Grant called after her, but she didn't turn. And in that moment, as the rain began to fall again, he understood. She hadn't wanted him to destroy the evidence. She wanted him to witness its destruction, to understand how far the truth could be manipulated, even by those who fought for it. The Bureau would call it a terrorist act. They'd erase her again. And this time, maybe... The fire burned for hours. Smoke rolled through the night sky like bruised clouds swallowing the stars. The air was thick with the smell of burnt plastic and wet asphalt. Sirens wailing from every direction. Lucas Grant sat on the curb, the orange glow of the flames painting his face in trembling light. He didn't blink, didn't move, just watched the wreckage, the place where Evelyn Carter had vanished and reappeared all at once. He could still hear her voice through the roar of it all. You wanted justice? Lucas, this is what it costs. Around him, the city kept its distance. Even the rain seemed afraid to touch the fire. Reporters would later call it a containment breach or an electrical explosion. The Bureau would clean it up before dawn, erase the details, rewrite the story until it fit in a single paragraph on page 12 of tomorrow's paper. But Grant knew what it was. A message, a warning, a burial. Duval approached from behind, her coat soaked through, hair plastered to her face. She sat beside him without a word. For a while, neither spoke. When she finally did, her voice was barely audible over the hiss of the rain. You think she's dead this time? Grant stared into the flames. I don't think Evelyn Carter dies that easily. They sat there as dawn bled into the horizon, the fire crews dousing the last of the embers. The Bureau's black SUVs lined the street now, their tinted windows reflecting everything and revealing nothing. Agents moved quietly, professionally, like undertakers at a mass funeral. One of them approached, a man in a tailored suit too clean for a night like this. Director Thomas Reddick. His face was calm, composed as if he'd just stepped out of a board meeting instead of a crime scene. Agent Grant, he said smoothly. Rough night. Grant didn't answer. Reddick glanced at Duval, then back to him. We'll need your full statement by noon. Headquarters is in crisis mode. The press is already circling. What's the official story? Grant asked quietly. Reddick smiled faintly. Same as always. Containment failure. Equipment malfunction. Nothing to worry about. He started to walk away, then paused, lowering his voice. Oh, and Grant, your suspension is pending review. You're to surrender your badge and weapon immediately. Grant looked up slowly, his voice steady. For what? Protocol violation. Unauthorized investigation. Collateral destruction of classified property. Reddick's smile didn't waver. I'll make sure your service record remains intact. You deserve that much. And with that, he was gone, swallowed by the smoke and the soft hum of Bureau engines pulling away. Duval turned to him, fury simmering just beneath the exhaustion in her eyes. They're burying you, Lucas. Grant watched the last of the fire fade into steam. No, he said quietly. They're burying the story. By noon, he was sitting in his apartment again, stripped of his badge, the silence heavier than the air. The rain had stopped. Outside, the city pulsed with the indifferent rhythm of traffic and human noise, but inside, everything felt still. The news played faintly from the television. A fire at an old storage facility, no casualties. Investigation ongoing. He turned it off. The drive Evelyn had given him, charred at the edges, cracked down the middle, lay on the kitchen counter. It shouldn't have survived the blast, but it had. He turned it over in his hands, fingers tracing the melted casing. Maybe he thought she'd known it would end this way. Maybe she'd left him exactly what she wanted him to find. He connected it to his laptop. The screen flickered to life, static for a moment, then a single folder appeared. After Indigo inside, audio recordings. Dozens of them, all labeled by date, all made after her supposed death. He clicked the first. Evelyn's voice filled the room, soft but unyielding. If you're hearing this, it means you found what they tried to erase. Indigo was never a failure. It was a trial run. They wanted to see how far they could push public. Manipulation before anyone noticed. Grant leaned closer. They replaced internal investigations with digital proxies, algorithmic decision systems disguised as oversight. Real agents were reassigned or eliminated. The rest were fed curated data to make them believe they were solving corruption when they were really protecting it. He felt his stomach tighten. The Bureau's latest system, Oculus, had been implemented just 6 months ago, an AI audit program that reviewed every operation in real time. It was supposed to make their work cleaner, faster, incorruptible. But if Evelyn was right, it was the opposite. He clicked the next recording. I've been tracing payment routes through shell corporations linked to Oculus's development. The money doesn't stop at the Bureau. It goes higher. Defense contracts, foreign accounts, private security firms. Someone is funding the illusion of justice. Grant sat back staring at the screen. The hum of the refrigerator grew louder. His reflection stared back at him through the glass, tired, hollow, uncertain. He whispered to himself, "How deep does it go?" The third recording started automatically. Evelyn's tone was different now, hurried, shaken. "They found me. If they get this message, they'll try to discredit it. Don't trust anyone in operations, not even your partner." Grant froze. The recording cut out. He stared at the laptop, the words echoing in his mind. "Not even your partner, Duval." His pulse quickened. She'd been by his side since day one, loyal, fearless, unflinching. But the way she'd found him after the fire, the timing, the fact she'd never once questioned Reddick's authority until it suited her. He stood pacing. The room felt smaller now, the shadows longer. His phone buzzed. A message. From Duval. Meet me. Corner of East 9th and Harbor. No bureau channels. It's important. Grant hesitated. Then he grabbed his coat. The intersection was quiet, half abandoned. Old warehouses lined the block, windows boarded, streetlights humming with low electricity. Duval stood near a parked car, scanning the street. "You came," she said, relieved. "I almost didn't." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He studied her face. "You knew about the fire, about Reddick's order. You showed up before the cleanup team." Her jaw tightened. "I followed a hunch. Or a directive." Something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of something raw. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. "Lucas," she said quietly, "I've been covering for you since the restaurant sting. You think they don't have your apartment tapped? Your phone? I'm the reason you're not already in custody." He didn't lower his guard. "Why?" "Because I believe you," she said. "Because I've seen things too." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small folder. Paper, not digital. "These are internal memos from Oculus Command. Reddick authorized a series of controlled leaks. Staged corruption cases meant to build public trust in the Bureau. Your restaurant sting was one of them." Grant took the papers. His name was on the first page. Under asset utilization. He looked up slowly. "I was bait," Duval nodded. "We both were." The wind swept between them, carrying the faint sound of a ship horn from the docks. "I don't know who's left to trust," he said. "Then stop trusting," she said. "Start surviving." Before he could respond, a black car turned the corner, headlights slicing through the mist. Duval's hand went to her weapon. "We have to move now." They ran, ducking between alleys. The car followed, tires screeching. Gunfire shattered glass somewhere behind them. Grant and Duval dove through the back door of an old shipping warehouse, the sound echoing off the hollow walls. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint scent of salt. Rows of abandoned crates towered above them. "Who are they?" Grant whispered. His breath came in short bursts, echoing off the metal crates that loomed around them like gravestones. Duval didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted across the shadows, searching for shapes that didn't belong. The beam of a flashlight sliced through the dust a few aisles away. The echo of boots followed. Steady, methodical. They weren't rushing. They knew where to go. Duval's voice came low, trembling at the edges. "They're not Bureau, not exactly." "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, drawing her gun, "Reddick doesn't give orders to these people, he takes them." Another sound, a door slamming shut. Then the faint static of a radio. Grant's hand brushed the cold surface of the crate beside him. Stenciled letters spelled out Indigo Storage. His pulse kicked harder. He turned back to her. "We're standing inside one of their facilities." Duval nodded grimly. "Not just one. The last one. The footsteps were closer now. Grant crouched, motioning for her to move. They weaved through narrow corridors of wooden pallets and decaying boxes. The air was heavy with salt and rust. Water dripped rhythmically from somewhere high above, each drop amplifying the tension. Then they reached the center of the warehouse, a large metal container, unlike the rest. Modern, clean, still humming faintly with power. On its side, the bureau insignia was barely visible under a layer of grime. Grant brushed it with his fingers. The logo peeled slightly, revealing a different emblem beneath it, an intricate geometric mark that pulsed faintly under the light. Duval frowned. That's not ours. He looked closer. It's not bureau, it's corporate. Indigo Technologies, she murmured. Grant froze. The defense contractor? Duval nodded. The same company that built Oculus. The truth hit like a silent explosion. It wasn't just corruption, it was convergence. The Bureau hadn't been infiltrated, it had merged. Law enforcement and private surveillance, bound by a single algorithmic leash. The flashlight beam swept past the crates again. Voices barked orders. Duval glanced at Grant. We can't stay here. But Grant wasn't listening anymore. His gaze was locked on a control panel mounted beside the container door. A biometric scanner blinked, waiting. He hesitated, then pressed his hand against the glass. For a moment, nothing. Then a soft click. The door hissed open. Inside, cold air spilled out like breath from a tomb. Rows of servers lined the narrow interior, glowing faintly blue. At the far end, a chair. A single terminal. And on the screen, Evelyn Carter's name. Duval stepped closer, her gun still raised. What the hell is this? Grant didn't answer. He approached the terminal, the sound of his boots swallowed by the soft hum of the machines. His hands shook as he reached for the keyboard. The screen came alive, lines of data scrolling like rain down glass. A video file opened automatically. Evelyn appeared, pale, thinner than he remembered, eyes shadowed but sharp. She looked directly at the camera. If you've made it this far, she began, her voice low and even, then you already know what indigo is. You just don't understand why. Duval took a step forward, her face flickering in the blue light. They sold justice, Evelyn continued, not as an ideal, but as a product. The Bureau was their prototype, a live simulation to test behavioral control systems. Every case, every sting, every public scandal was orchestrated to feed Oculus, to refine its ability to predict and manipulate human response. Grant's mouth went dry. They let corruption flourish because outrage is data, Evelyn said, and data is profit. Her eyes softened just for a moment. Grant, if you're seeing this, I didn't betray you. I just couldn't save you. The video cut out. Silence. The hum of electricity, the pounding of his heart. Then the sound of boots again, closer now, echoing inside the metal walls. Duval grabbed his arm. We have to go. Grant pulled away. No, this is it. This is what she died for. She's not the one about to die, Duval hissed. But Grant was already typing, fingers flying across the keys. He pulled up directories, logs, encrypted comms. He didn't need all of it, just one piece that couldn't be buried. Data streamed across the monitor, flashing red. Access denied. Override required. A voice boomed from behind them. Step away from the terminal. Reddick stood at the doorway, flanked by two armed men in black tactical gear. His suit was immaculate even here. His eyes, though, were cold and tired. Agent Grant, he said calmly. You were always too curious for your own good. Duval turned, weapon raised. You set us up. Reddick sighed. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Grant glanced at the monitor. Oculus isn't oversight, it's control. Reddick tilted his head. Control brings peace, order, predictability. Isn't that what we were fighting for? He gestured toward the servers. You think the world wants the truth? They want comfort. They want someone to blame when things go wrong. Indigo gives them that. By rewriting reality, Grant said. By refining it, Reddick corrected. And you could have been part of it. The tension hung like wire stretched to its limit. Then Duval moved first. A single shot cracked through the air. One of Reddick's guards dropped. The others opened fire. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off metal. Grant dove behind a server stack, glass shattering above him. Reddick shouted, "You can't stop this, Grant. It's already in motion." Grant slammed his hand against the keyboard. The screen flashed again. Data transfer initiated. Evelyn's file, the audio logs, the memos, all uploading. Duval crawled beside him, bleeding from her shoulder. Where's it going? Every public node, every press database. If it finishes, everyone will know. Reddick's footsteps echoed closer. The hum of the servers rose, the lights flickering under the strain. Grant turned, gun in hand. "It's over, Thomas." Reddick smirked. "You think one leak will change anything? People will call it a hoax. A conspiracy. The truth doesn't matter anymore, it's just content." He raised his weapon. "You lost the moment you believed they'd listen." Grant fired first. The bullet hit Reddick square in the chest. He stumbled back, eyes wide with disbelief, then collapsed beside the flickering terminal. His blood smeared across the bureau insignia like ink. The servers began to hum louder, alarms blaring. The upload bar crept upward, 82%, 83%. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning circuits. Duval coughed, pressing her hand against her wound. "Lucas, we have to go." "Not yet." "Lucas." He looked at her, eyes burning with something between grief and defiance. "They used us. Used her. If we walk away now, they win again." The floor shuddered as the backup generator exploded. Flames licked across the wiring, climbing fast. 5%. 90%. He grabbed Duval's arm and pulled her toward the exit. The fire followed, swallowing cables and metal in sheets of orange. 5%. The doorway loomed ahead. They stumbled into the open air. As the warehouse erupted behind them, a bloom of light against the night sky. 100%. The screen went black. They collapsed behind a concrete barrier, gasping. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. For a moment there was only the sound of their breathing and the faint mechanical whine of systems dying behind them. Then Duval's phone buzzed. She pulled it out with trembling hands. Dozens of notifications filled the screen. Headlines, emails, public feeds. Bureau AI leak exposes global data manipulation network. Evidence links defense contractors to internal control ops. She looked at Grant. He said nothing, just stared at the horizon as the fire painted the dawn red. "They'll come for us," she said softly. "They already have," he replied. He leaned back, closing his eyes, letting the heat of the explosion wash over him. For the first time in months, he didn't feel like running. The city below them began to stir. Screens lit up in every window, phones buzzed, news anchors scrambled to verify what they were seeing. And for a few fleeting hours, truth wasn't something buried or sold. It was alive, raw, unfiltered. But even as the world began to awaken, Grant knew it wouldn't last. The machine was too big, too adaptable. He turned to Duval, voice barely a whisper. "We started something we can't finish." She looked at him, eyes reflecting the firelight. "Then we finish it another way." In the distance, sirens drew closer. The first Bureau drones appeared above the smoke, their searchlights sweeping across the ruins. Grant stood slowly, every muscle aching, and faced the light. "Evelyn wanted to expose them," he said quietly. "I think she did more than that." Duval frowned. "What do you mean?" He watched the drones hover, their sensors blinking. "She wanted to wake them up." For the first time in a long while he smiled, not with triumph but with something that looked like peace. The wind shifted. The fire behind them began to die, and as the sun rose over the scarred skyline, two fugitives stood in its glow, small, human, and defiant, against the weight of everything that was built to silence them. The world had changed. Whether it was for better or worse, Only time would decide. Grant took one last look at the burning warehouse, then turned toward the light. "Let's disappear," he said, and together they did, vanishing into the awakening city as the machines searched the ruins for ghosts. The city never truly slept, but that morning it felt like it was holding its breath. News screens glowed from every window, the kind of glow that made people stop mid-step and stare, whispering to strangers as if trying to confirm the world they were in was still real. Cars idled at intersections. Coffee went cold in trembling hands. The truth had broken through, not as a weapon but as light, harsh, uninvited, undeniable. By the time Lucas Grant and Mia Duval reached the outskirts, the skyline behind them was smeared with smoke and gold. They walked until the sirens were only echoes, until the air smelled less like concrete and more like earth. The fields beyond the city stretched endlessly, dew clinging to the grass, like tiny shards of glass catching the sunrise. Grant's coat was torn, his hands still stained with the black dust of the warehouse. He hadn't spoken since they left. Neither had she. When they finally stopped, it was by an abandoned rest stop that hadn't seen travelers in years. The sign above the door was sun-bleached, half the letters missing. Grant pushed it open. The hinges gave a soft cry. Inside, dust floated lazily through slanted light, the quiet hum of old neon signs flickering faintly. They sat in silence. For the first time in months, there were no orders to follow, no targets to chase, no voices in his ear telling him what was real. Mia poured 2 cups of coffee from a machine that should have been dead decades ago. It tasted metallic, burnt, but neither cared. "Think they believed it?" she asked quietly. Grant stared out the cracked window. Beyond it, the highway cut across the plains like an old scar. "Some did," he said. "Some won't. And the rest?" He shrugged. "They'll forget." The words hung there heavy and honest. Outside, a flock of birds passed overhead, their wings slicing through the sunlight like scattered brushstrokes. Mia leaned back against the counter, her voice soft. "You ever think Evelyn knew it would end like this?" Grant took a slow breath. She didn't care how it ended. She cared that it mattered. There was something almost fragile in the way he said it, as if speaking her name too loud might break the silence she left behind. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, scorched drive, the one that had started everything. The label was barely legible now, melted at the corners, but the imprint of her initials remained. He set it on the counter between them. "This belongs to no one now." Mia looked at it for a long moment. "You're not keeping it?" Grant shook his head. "The world already has it, and if I hold on, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what more I could have done." He stood, stepping outside. The air was cold, the kind that bit at the lungs but reminded you that you were still alive. The fields swayed under the breeze, stretching toward the horizon like a vast green ocean. The city shimmered in the distance, quiet now, but restless beneath its calm. Mia joined him. "They'll rebuild the bureau," she said. "Change the name, swap the faces, make the world think it's all fixed." He nodded. "That's what systems do. They adapt." Then what was the point? He looked at her, eyes, catching the sunlight just right. The faint glint of someone who'd seen too much and still wasn't done seeing. "The point," he said, "was to remind them they're being watched too." For a long time they said nothing. The wind carried the distant hum of the city, faint sirens, murmuring engines, the low thrum of a world spinning faster than it could think. Then Mia spoke again, barely above a whisper. "You think she'd be proud?" Grant smiled faintly. "No," he said. "She'd tell us it's not over." He turned away from the road and started walking. Not fast, not running anymore, just walking, like someone who'd finally stopped chasing ghosts. Mia hesitated, then followed. The road stretched ahead, cracked and uneven, the yellow lines fading into the horizon. Every few steps, the world seemed to get quieter, the noise of the city dissolving behind them. They passed fields, windmills, a lone farmhouse with windows boarded shut. A boy stood in the yard staring at a tablet that glowed with headlines he couldn't quite understand. His father called him inside, but the boy didn't move. He just stared at the screen, as if realizing for the first time that what it showed wasn't always the same as what it meant. Grant watched him for a moment, then looked away. By noon, the sun was high. They stopped by a riverbank where the water caught the light like liquid glass. Grant crouched, dipping his hand in the stream. It was cold, clean. He let the current slide over his fingers, washing away the soot, the blood, the memory. For a moment, it almost felt like redemption. Mia sat beside him, shoes off, letting her feet touch the water. "You know," she said, "I used to think the world needed people like us. People who fix the broken parts." He looked at her, curious. "And now?" She smiled, small and tired. "Now I think maybe the world just needs to see the cracks, to remember they're there." Grant nodded slowly. Maybe that's what Evelyn wanted. Not to fix it, but to make people look. The river moved quietly, steady as breath. Somewhere downstream, a leaf spun in circles, caught in an eddy it couldn't escape. He watched it for a while, thinking about how easy it was for truth to get trapped in the same way, circling endlessly, waiting for the current to shift. A truck passed on the distant road, its reflection flashing briefly in the water. Mia turned to him. "What will you do now?" He thought for a long time before answering. "Disappear for a while. Let the story live without me." She nodded. "And after that?" Grant's eyes traced the horizon, the thin line where sky met land, where everything unknown waited. "Maybe I'll start listening again," he said. "Really listening." The wind carried his words away, scattering them into the endless blue. For a moment, everything felt still, the kind of stillness that comes after chaos, not before it, the kind that carries both peace and consequence. He stood and began walking along the riverbank, his reflection moving beside him in the water. Mia watched him go, her expression unreadable. Then she looked up at the sky, vast, open, unfiltered, and followed. They reached a small bridge by dusk, the sun dipping low, setting the clouds on fire. Grant stopped halfway across and leaned against the railing. The reflection of the sunset turned the river into molten gold. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind lift his hair, carrying the smell of rain from somewhere far away. "Do you think people will remember us?" Mia asked. He thought for a moment. "No," he said softly. "But they'll remember the noise we made." The first raindrop landed on the railing, darkening the rusted metal. Then another. Then hundreds. The storm rolled in quietly, like an exhale. As the rain began to fall, Grant lifted his face to it. The world was changing, slowly, stubbornly, but changing nonetheless. The truth was out there now, wild and untamed, too vast for anyone to cage again. Maybe that was enough. He turned to Mia, voice almost lost in the rain. "You ever wonder what the world would look like if everyone stopped pretending they weren't being watched?" She met his gaze. "Maybe," she said. "It would finally start seeing itself." The rain grew heavier, drumming against the bridge, washing the dust from their clothes, the smoke from their hair. Somewhere far away, the city lights flickered like nervous stars. Somewhere closer, the river swelled, carrying leaves, debris, and the faint shimmer of something that looked like hope. Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Old, worn, a relic from before the bureau. He flipped it once, caught it in his palm, then tossed it into the river. It vanished beneath the ripples, swallowed without sound. "What was that for?" Mia asked. He smiled. "For everything we couldn't fix." The night settled around them, soft and unhurried. Crickets began their song, blending with the gentle hiss of the rain. Grant watched the river a moment longer, then turned away, his footsteps merging with the rhythm of the storm. Behind them, the bridge glistened under the moonlight, empty and still. Ahead, the road curved into darkness, where neither of them knew what waited. But for the first time, the uncertainty didn't feel like fear. It felt like freedom. Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of the world continued. Machines, headlines, whispers, lies, and truths, all tangled together. yet beneath it all something had shifted. The silence between one breath and the next felt different now, heavier with possibility. And as they disappeared into that silence, the last question hung unspoken in the air. Not about justice or power or corruption, but something simpler, more human. When the truth finally sets you free, do you know who you are without your chains? The rain fell harder. The river carried on, and the world for a fleeting moment remembered how to listen.